On the face of it, making movies for a living seems like a pretty sweet gig, but it's not always smiles and sunshine. Shooting a film can be a grueling process, and there's no guarantee that co-stars will get on, or even worse than that. Every now and then something truly creepy and unnerving can happen during the production process, the kind of thing that would make anyone reconsider working on set ever again, regardless of the perks of the job. So with that being said, I'm Jem from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 more movies with creepy on-set stories. Number 10. Isla Fisher almost drowned in Now You See Me. It takes an entire team of workers to put even the smallest of movie shots together, and action or dangerous scenes are of course no different. These will usually bring in a professional stunt person to take on the brunt of the work rather than the star of the show, but this isn't always the case. Tom Cruise is famous for doing his own stunts, but he's not the only one. While filming Now You See Me, Isla Fisher took on that responsibility herself when her character was locked and chained underwater as part of her magic act. In the movie, Fisher's Henley Reeves escapes her shackles before deadly piranhas are released into the water. But as part of the show, she of course has to struggle, upping the dramatic aspect. However, while shooting the scene, Fisher actually did struggle to break free of the chains and genuinely almost drowned. According to the actor, though there was a quick release button on her handcuffs, the chain that went between her ankles and wrists did not release. While she was struggling, everyone thought she was acting, and as there was no pre-agreed safety signal to get her out in case of an emergency, Fisher was very lucky to escape with her life. Number 9. The Summoning of a Deity in The Craft. The Craft has become something of a cult classic since its release in 1996, following 4 friends who take an interest in witchcraft and find themselves falling deeper into the world of the occult. Such magic, however, seemingly was not contained to just the screen. There were reportedly a handful of spooky things that happened during the filming, but one incident in particular sticks out. When the 4 girls, led by Fairuza Balk's Nancy, go to the beach, they hold a ritual of sorts with the aim of invoking the spirit of the deity, Manon. While filming, according to director Andy Fleming, at the exact moment the girls began the ritual's incantations, the sea began to rise and at one point wiped out the whole set. This was after being told that they were already at high tide and that the waves shouldn't go any higher than they already were. Add in the fact that Manon, a fictional deity created for a film, sounds eerily and suspiciously close to Manannan, the Gaelic god of the sea, and things get even more spooky. Number 8. Almost everything burnt down in The Exorcist. The Exorcist is quite simply one of the most infamous movies in the history of cinema. The horror flick was met with all manner of hysteria and terror when it was released in 1973, and it's still considered one of the scariest pictures of all time, even 50 years later. For all the bizarre events that were brought to the screen, the production crew of the film experienced more than enough to creep anyone out while creating them. People were hurt, the cast and crew were reportedly blessed in the name of protection from the weird and far from wonderful things happening, and a fire burned down almost all of the set. The almost is important here because if the whole set had burned down, it would have simply chalked up as some bad luck caused by a pigeon flying into a light box. However, the whole set didn't burn down, as there was one room that survived. Throughout the movie, the majority of the horror takes place inside Regan McNeil, played by Linda Blair's, bedroom. From the famous vomiting scene to the exorcism itself. How strange then that while the set of the McNeil house burned down, Regan's room was the only one that was spared. Number 7. Jared Leto's gifts in Suicide Squad. Method acting has caused a lot of controversy over the years, with actors taking on the persona of their character even when not filming to immerse themselves in the role and, in theory, give a deeper performance. Robert Pattinson may have said it best when he pointed out that you never see anyone method acting for a nice role, only when they're playing an a-hole. Jared Leto is famous for throwing himself into such methods, and did so to disgusting levels on the set of Suicide Squad in 2016. There are plenty of different stories surrounding Leto's behaviour on set as Mr. J, many of them concerning gifts. These are gifts that he sent his castmates while in character as the Clown Prince of Crime. Margot Robbie received a live rat, Karen Fukuhara was given adult toys and magazines, and the whole cast, according to Viola Davis, was introduced to Leto when his henchman dropped a dead pig in front of everyone during a table read. The reaction to these interactions was varied, but the whole point of them was for Leto to be in character of the Joker. They were supposed to be scary and to be creepy, and it's more than a little unsettling to think that these things were going through his mind as good ideas. Number 6. Michael J. Fox almost died in Back to the Future Part 3. Isla Fisher is not the only actor to come dangerously close to death while filming a scene. A similar thing happened to Michael J. Fox on the set of Back to the Future Part 3 in 1990. While Marty McFly, Fox, and Doc Brown, played by Christopher Lloyd, were in the Wild West in 1885. During his escapades in the past trying to save Doc Brown from Biff Tannen's grandfather, Marty was captured and set to be hanged. In fact, he was hanged for just a second before Doc was able to come and rescue him. While Marty had to be saved on screen, Michael J. Fox had to be saved off it. Isla Fisher's trouble came from shooting her own stunts. However, this was never really supposed to be a stunt in the slightest for Fox. His whole body was never going to be in shot, so he was able to stand on a box with the noose around his neck, but it just didn't look realistic enough. It was Fox himself who suggested making it look more authentic by getting rid of the box and actually hanging. As can be expected, one of his key arteries was blocked and he passed out, and it was a few seconds before anyone realised he wasn't acting. There's commitment to getting a good shot, and then there's just plain stupidity. Number 5. Multiple maulings in Raw. Typically, even with potentially dangerous stunts going on, movie sets are made as safe as they possibly can. However, if you look back through history, the same could not always be said. There are a few greater examples of this than Raw, a 1981 movie that was not ultimately released theatrically until 2015. The danger that director and star Noel Marshall and his wife and co-star Tippi Hedren put themselves and their entire cast through to make the film is unprecedented and downright absurd. The premise of the film is almost similar to that of The Birds, but swapping out the titular attackers for lions, tigers, and other unbelievably dangerous animals. Some of the moments that wound up on screen required no acting whatsoever, as the cast and crew were truly attacked by these beasts with little to no concern for safety taken. These wild working conditions saw Melanie Griffith need plastic surgery after her eye was attacked, Hedren herself needing skin grafts, Marshall was mauled so much he got blood poisoning, and cinematographer Jan de Bont had his scalp ripped off and required stitches. These are life-threatening, life-changing injuries that should not happen anywhere near a film set. Number 4. Nuclear exposure in The Conqueror. Raw may have presented its cast and crew with immediate physical danger in the form of big, angry cats, but it's nothing compared to the health risk the team behind The Conqueror put themselves through in 1956. Widely considered to be not only one of the worst of its generation, the movie is a consensus pick for one of the worst of all time. Production was reportedly a nightmare, suffering plenty of setbacks and problems, but the biggest of them was the location. Exterior scenes for Dick Powell's critical failure were filmed in a desert in Utah, 137 miles downwind of the Nevada National Security Site. At the time, this was a test site for nuclear bombs, something that of course greatly affected the cast and crew of the movie. All the while filming was going on, the 220 people working on the picture were constantly exposed to high levels of radiation that would ultimately prove fatal for many of them. It's reported that of these 220, 91 developed cancer in the following years, and 46 sadly lost their battle. Number 3. An indoctrination into voodoo in The Serpent and the Rainbow. Wes Craven is undoubtedly a master of the horror genre, and in 1988 brought to life The Serpent and the Rainbow, a story based in and around the world of voodoo. A master though he may be, even Craven couldn't create anything as creepy as what happened to writer Richard Maxwell while on set. According to the director himself, Maxwell had been interviewing the man who had taught The Serpent and the Rainbow author Wade Davies about voodoo, and said that he'd love to get indoctrinated into it himself. The man promised that he would be, and from there there, the writer apparently lost his mind within the space of a week. Maxwell locked himself in his room. He stopped wearing clothes, he couldn't concentrate on writing, and on the morning they were to begin shooting, he woke Craven up at 5 AM, saying that those practicing voodoo and the producers were conspiring to kill him. Naturally, he was swiftly put on a plane home. 4 days later, he woke up in LA and said the last thing he remembered was hearing the man he was interviewing say, "You will be." That's taking an interest in the subject for your work, and then, as we say, there's going too far. Number 2, a real skeleton in Dawn of the Dead. Hampered by the technology of their time, there are plenty of older horror films that can't quite pack the same scary punch as they used to in comparison to what industry magic can still achieve today. Still, for 1978's Dawn of the Dead, legendary special effects technician Tom Savini ensured that no movie would ever include the image of a more realistic skeleton. This was, however, completely by accident. He brought to set what he believed to be a prop skeleton, but what was later confirmed to be the real-life remains of a woman who had died a century earlier. The story of its discovery is incredible, with arguably the most bizarre aspect being that the police officer who noticed the human remains in the window of a costume shop after its stint on the set only thought it was the real deal because of the fake skin Savini had added to it himself. It's not known exactly the path the skeleton that would be known as Dawn Doe took before ultimately landing on the set of Dawn of the Dead, and you could argue that that's probably for the best. Let us know which story you think is the worst and any others you know in the comments down below, and while you're there, drop us a like, share and subscribe too. But number 1 is genuine corpses in Apocalypse Now. Normally, it would be difficult to top having a genuine skeleton on set when it comes to creepy stories, though just 1 year after Dawn of the Dead came Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now, which just about outdid the weirdness of working with a 100-year-old skeleton. Apocalypse Now was infamous for its troubles off-screen, with Marlon Brando and Dennis Hopper refusing to be on set together, as well as far from acceptable working conditions, I'll add. But the weirdest and worst aspect of making the picture has to be the real-life corpses that were used. The story sees Brando's Colonel Kurtz holed up in a small village, worshipped as something of a deity and surrounded by piles of dead bodies. Though co-producer Greg Fredrickson was under the impression that these bodies were props, they were actually real corpses and had apparently been provided to the set by a grave robber, something the prop department justified for the sake of authenticity. Yes, everyone wants a movie to feel as authentic and as real as possible, but going so far as to bring in actual dead bodies to hang from trees is more than a step too far. After intervention and questioning from the Philippine police, the bodies were taken away and replaced by extras, as should really have been the case from the very beginning.